Hello to a new video. Today is Monday the 9th of January 2017. That is 7:12 Central European Time in the morning. I got some notes again. This video will be called Not to Bore You, and I give you a little insight into further little mechanisms and routines, more routines than particular mechanisms, though we do go into the mechanisms on one of those with which I'm being tortured, and I will tell you my new understanding of how to interpret all of that. So, you know, I could imagine that for the most part I'd bore the handful of people who have access to these videos. Maybe this video won't bore you to quite the same extent. There are several things that I'll do, as most of the time, in no particular order. Cigarettes in this here part of the world come with ridiculous warning and shock photographs. Here you can see a toddler. I'm not kidding you. This is real. I didn't forge this. I just bought this from the vending machine. This is real. A toddler with a cigarette, because Kinder von Rauchern werden oft selbst zu Rauchern. Children of smokers often become smokers themselves, and they start at toddler age, right? Some of these photographs are so completely grotesque. There's another one where a father, I guess, that dude, if it is a dude, looks a little androgynous, might be an ugly woman, I'm not sure, has the toddler on the arm and a cigarette on the left and blows smoke into the face of the toddler, like any smoker would do that, right? So it's completely ridiculous. And because these warning things are so ridiculous, I took it onto me to make counter such a long time ago. I wrote them down. They will actually be printed on cigarette packs in Freiland, just to entertain the smokers once they're allowed to smoke again. One of them is, and I said it in German, Raucher auf die Gefahren des Rauchens hinzuweisen, kann die Gesundheit des Rauchers gefährden. I came up with that. Okay, I came up with a bunch of these lines. This is one of them. In English, it means something like pointing out to smokers that smoking is hazardous to your health might prove hazardous to the health of those who point it out to smokers. The idea is that smokers don't need to be told, don't want to be told countless times how it's unhealthy and whatnot, right? So it might be a little, the Mac is a little tilted, sorry. It might be a little unhealthy for you if you tell me how it's not healthy for me if I smoke. That is the background of my version. Here is a nice example of something they extracted, or actually found on the Mac, because I have this written down in the filing documents, and decided to use against me. Namely, and there's several different ways they can do it. It's most likely by ping-ponging or by shoving it in general, and then really ping-ponging. Two phases, or using this as an entry into the ping-pong, right? Namely, two phases telling one another that smoking is unhealthy, and as each points it out to the other's health is mitigated according to my advice, so to speak, and that results in a virtual simulation of illness, namely especially everything lung related and whatnot, you know, all this shit here, right, that you find here. That is what is being done, okay? So my line is being stolen, not by my phases. I also like this because this is a good example of how it's not my phases that come up with these routines. This is a line that I came up with because I thought it funny and overdue to have such kind of comments on cigarette boxes and so on and so forth. And they extracted that, the fucking filth that torture me, and thought, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we had his phases warn one another and while doing that mitigate one another's health virtually. So this is one of the particular routines that today made poof. I just want to point this out, just to give you a little example. Another one, for instance, says, one of mine says, Adolf Hitler war Nichtraucher. That's all it will say on the pack. Adolf Hitler was a non-smoker. Okay? Just to point it out to the smokers, you know, feel good smoking. Adolf Hitler was a non-smoker. You don't want to be Hitler. And they work this likewise into every time when I don't actually have a fucking cigarette lit in my hands, that one of my phases sort of kind of has to pretend it's Adolf Hitler or something. Okay? Also made poof, along with all the other shit that made poof. And any of this being worked as feeding that, making poof. Just for completeness sake. So this one covered. Another one, touching back on a video from yesterday or the day before yesterday, I did mention how they are once more having retouched the various routines on YouTube is typically where I get it from. Band names and song titles and even song lyrics. And here is and I came across a really nice one. I must admit, it is of at least an ever so slight degree of intelligence. Okay? Still, nothing I came up with. Other people did. Namely, a Metallica line from Enter Sandman, sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight. The way they worked this was into some kind of conditional always on that I'd have to, that one of my phases, virtual bodies, had to keep one eye open, that being coerced onto my real body, always not being able to close the eyes fully, and even when the lids are closed, having the visual cortex have the impression that its eyes were open. That's a very fascinating sensation I can point out to you. Namely, one eye in particular. Sleeping with one eye open, meaning whenever I lay down to sleep, one of my eyes was forced pried open because the turning off mechanism worked was me gripping my pillow tight. And here's getting interesting because they know I don't have a pillow. I mean, I own a pillow, but I don't use it. I don't ever use pillows. I just sleep on a mattress with a blanket. I don't use a pillow. So there was no way for me, or so they thought, to turning it off in that kind of sense. Because I couldn't grip my pillow tight, sleeping with one eye open, because I didn't have no pillow, right? And that's where the little, I mean, it's mostly wannabe lower league deviousness, but an ever so slight degree of at least imagination and inspiration went into that, and that can only stem from a bit of actual intelligence. So some fuckers out there are at least ever so slightly intelligent. That's a good sign. I do want to point this out. But this little routine explained, and really, how there is no pillow for me to turn it off, right? Just that it made poof because I figured it and it made poof and whatnot. I don't need no fucking pillow. But to give you a little example of how they work lyrics, okay? Next one. Ages ago, really this is, I still lived in the 12th district. This is ages ago. I wrote a little short story, never finished it actually, just bits and pieces here and there, fragments, where it was, I think the working title was in German, Schlaf der Ungerechten. There is a phrase called Schlaf der Gerechten, which means, I'm not sure if that exists in English to the same degree, it means sleep of the just, which is a very euphemistic way of putting death. Death is the sleep of the just. And my story would have been called Sleep of the Unjust, so to speak, because the idea was that that dude in that story was a little, you know, it was a bit of a psycho horror story kind of thing, and he would not get to sleep and be dead, but he would constantly have to relive a certain thing, and that would be the sleep of the unjust rather than the sleep of the just, when you're just dead, right? And they utilize this, I found out. They actually utilize this, namely, by the following logic. To my phases, all of this is work to my phases. To my phases, are you sleeping the sleep of the just? Which really means, are you dead? And my phases would say, no, of course not. Ah, but then you must be sleeping the sleep of the unjust. And that means you must be unjust. And with that, they got my phases, the virtual identity underlying mechanics, ultra delusionally hijacked and coerced into keeping up remnants of something like a virtual identity that was unjust, if nothing other than that. And not by their arguing the sanest man on earth, the prime protector of mankind and whatnot, because I'm the most just man on earth, being the prime protector of mankind. And that is something that they worked on the phases. Well, as I'm not dead, I can only be unjust. That is how they completely hijacked the logic. And see, you need to understand, it's not that your phases are so easily foolable to buy into such ridiculous logic twisting. They are getting this shoved by illegal connections internally in the ports list straight into their thinking field in the ports list. It's not that they are allowed to think it through. They get that notion straight shoved in via the proxy devices. Okay? I want you to understand that. But it's another nice little example of how they fuck things up. So that one explained. Then, this is more. This is not really the category of the Metallica one. This is more like really. Well, that's not impressive and creative or anything. It's are you on Earth? My face is being asked. There is an environs definition box. It's not actually a port entry number wise, but it's a definition box for the virtual environs and for the sub-virtual environs. Both of those exist, and I insist and try to command my system, which is subjected to a phase illegally. I've explained that in the past, that it is to delete any content of these descriptor boxes, so to speak, for the subvirtual and for the virtual environs. And what they're doing here is once more trying, outside of this systematics, to make something like an underlying minimum functionality of me allegedly being not on Earth because I'm not on Earth. In the sense that I don't stand on Earth. You know, I'm here not on Earth. I'm on hardwood floor that is not Earth. When I'm in bed, I'm not on Earth. I'm on a mattress, right? It's not Earth as in where you plant flowers in. That Earth. This is Earth. Are you on Earth and are you on Earth? Right? That thing. They have scanned, and by that I mean just go through the extraction protocols forever and ever and ever to see wherever they can put inverted comma around it and hijack the sense. My face has been made to believe that they are not on Earth, the planet, because I'm not on Earth, the dirt, you know, Earth. That is one of the things that they also work. And that's really the same kind of thing, well, it's not the same kind of thing, but it's sort of like the sleep of the unjust. Well, then you must be unjust because you're not dead. You know, it's that kind of thing. This is something they worked. All of this made poof, right? I'm just giving you examples here. What else is there? Here is something very interesting I found out. When it comes to my foreign languages, and here we're talking not the environs definition, but the body descriptions of the phases. They have tried to work a mechanism which sort of kind of halfway, occasionally, every blue moon, more or less, ballpark, did something remotely akin to what they hoped for, namely, somehow force onto the phases that they were only native to one particular foreign language and subject the definition of their body descriptions to that language, which resulted therein that if I would not know that language's word for a particular body part, that body part was not available to the body description. What does that mean? For instance, I give you an example. Nuts, right? That's probably not a good example because the innards is a little hard to simulate. Nasenscheidenwand. There's something. Nasenscheidenwand. That is the in the middle of your nose, right in here in the middle of your nose. That thing that actually splits your nose into a left and a right nostril. That is in German. It's called Nasenscheidenwand. I have no idea what that is called in English. And if they kept that body description definition in English, they said, well, you don't know the word for it, and hence you don't have. They try the same with Japanese, which is severely blocked, and I never had all the body parts. I just know the most basic body parts, like atama for head or something like that. And they tried that a lot, so that my phases are not ever having full sets of bodies because they don't know in that particular language the words for the body parts that would go into it, which is only possible because they subject the system, because I insist on having the body description fields be empty, namely thereby keeping it automatically to the natural set. But they try to override that with, yeah, but you don't even know what parts you have, right? Or they might demand the medicinal terms for it, or something like that. And when we come to languages, we touch back on something else, namely the question, which languages do you know? Right? No, not the inverted comma, no. I know German, English, a bit of Japanese, a bit of Italian. I had Latin in high school, and that's pretty much it. But I know pretty much every language. You know, I know, say, Chinese. You know, I know there is a language called Chinese, so I know Chinese. I know Swahili. I don't speak a fucking word. I never did, I never will, but I know Swahili, right? I know Klingon. I know Elfish tongue. I know whatever fictive languages, some of which I myself came up for fantasy worlds or whatever. I know those languages. Oh, do you have the words for the anatomic parts in those languages? No? Well, sorry, Faex, then your body can't have that, right? That is what they're working. They are trying to sabotage the body descriptions indirectly by forcing them to be in foreign languages, and if a body part or an organ or whatever is not in my vocabulary, and you know, anatomic terms aren't in my vocabulary, not even in English. I could probably only mention half of my body in English, you know, if you go into the details. Then they say it's not available to the Faex, you know. So that is one way that they try to work this. Or can you say that in Swahili, for instance? To which the Faex would say that in Swahili. You know, can you say that in Swahili? That in Swahili. Oh, you speak Swahili. Wonderful. Well, then from this day forth, the body descriptions are only possible if you can give the Swahili name for the fucking organs and body parts and whatnot. That is also something they do. That was that. And there is one more thing here, this one actually. The same logic of having it coerced into foreign tongues and not being possible if I don't know the word for it is also utilized for objects and for Tätigkeiten, for ongoings and occupations and whatnot. You know, for instance, I know that is called Naseputzen. In English it's called blowing your nose. I have no fucking idea what it's called in Japanese, honestly. I don't know what it's called in Italian, honestly. And the way they work this is that the particular phase, all of the phases need to blow their nose, because they copy the need to blow the nose and they artificially created and copied onto all phases. But I only get to blow the nose virtually. Virtually, the nose of, say, the Japanese defined would remain unblown, which results therein that the moment I'm down and put away the tissue, the very next moment I immediately could blow my nose again, because it still remains unblown, and that is being fed back into the real actual physical nose to create once more the necessity to blow my nose and to force produce snot like crazy. That is one of the things that they work. So this is not just going on for body description, technical terms for organs and shit, but really for anything I do, right? Any activity there, any process, any ongoing, any item or whatnot. That thing explained. And I think there was one more, word count. This is something a little hard to explain actually. The word count is on vocabulary because of short fiction writing, where quintessentially you get paid per word and you count how many words there are in your story. That is my definition of word count. They have put that under inverted comma, word count. They try to work routines on my phases that they actually keep track of words that I use. Namely, count how often I use these words. Say, in many of my videos, for instance, I use the word speechless. You know these things, but when I, over your idiocy, when I go like, speechless. And every time I would say speechless, my routines, excuse me, my routines would actually go 427, and the next time you use speechless, it will be 428. They do this for a whole lot of diverse reasons. First of all, they try to fill out my, this is fourth finger inverted comma, okay? My RAM, okay? No, my brain is no computer, just so you understand what I mean. They basically try to bereave me of thought capacity. And that works theoretically. It worked in the olden days where you could pry the buffers open. They can't do that anymore. So they try to work it other ways. But just keeping my mind pointlessly, counting every single word I use, more or less. Now that doesn't really work because my phases often are distracted just by what goes on. My phases are distracted by anything that distracts me. Like for instance, if I have a scratch, if I don't shave in a while and the stubble scratch and the sweatshirt might scratch, then all it would take is a scratch, actually an itch, that's what I mean, to distract even the phases whose job it would be to count the words. So that's just the banalest reason how they could be thrown from counting words. But still, they try to count words best as possible. Previously did, no longer do. I want to make that clear because that too may poof. For that reason of just wasting resources in my mind, that is one reason. And the other reason is that they actually, such as speechless, try to have a, well, you've done it so many times and now you'd have to undo it so many times. They try to force speechlessness like a muting filter on the phases like it used to be possible. Speechless, you had 428 speechlesses. Now you would have to unmute 429 times to actually have a speech again. Right? That is, for some select words in completely different contexts, that is what they tried to do. Additionally, there was something a little more, it made poof, I cannot tell it anymore, and I don't care really, but it was something where I think of it in an analogy like Tetris. In the sense that you have different blocks where you fill out one line and then it disappears. I'm not sure if they paired words, maybe opposites of words or whatever, or to create full sentences that they wanted constantly repeated or something, but they had a mechanism of actually working off from that these counts and stacks of how often I use how many words. There was some kind of mechanism there, but they made poof. But I just wanted to explain that to you. And that was here actually. Another thing is has a similarity to me not knowing the coerced or demanded foreign language word for it. Namely, I in one of my videos or several of my videos, probably weeks back now, weeks and weeks, I used the word surprisative. I think that's what I call it. The surprisative is that thing, if you think you are at the superlative already and then find out there's yet something more, that's called the surprisative. I think that's what I call it. And they try to work surprise, so speechless is a bad example because that can't be utilized to you can't be most speechless, you can, or more speechless. That doesn't work. But in other words where that would work, they try to work a surprisative. And if I don't know it, then they use it. I'm not sure if I explained this right. They're just trying to fuck around. Now, those are just some of the examples. What I come to understand, this is the important thing about this video. What I came to understand because of all of this, and also because how they retouched some of these routines recently, I finally understood something. See, as I've always, not always, but for ages and ages known, it is basically all manners of willing executioner groups from different interest groups, right? Different interest groups' willing executioners who are all collaborating against me, not the interest groups. And I figured today, what with me reminding yesterday, I think it was, the Germans of how the Abwehrhand is improving their idiocy routines, that this might actually be happening with the full awareness of all the involved willing executioners. Let me explain that to you, dear interest groups. I want to explain to you, who do not at all collaborate with other interest groups, what your willing executioners are doing. All of you willing executioners use me here, discredited in all manners and ways, but nonetheless use me here to show one another while all the others watch what latest shit they came up with. And they make it a sport to improve on one another's routines. Which means, dear actual interest groups rather than willing executioners, all of you are willing executioners, all of them. That is, those of all of you AGs share all of their tricks of the trade and secrets with all the other willing executioners. But I can assure you, certainly not with all the other interest groups. That really means, and then not, and I'll get to the why not, but that really superficially might spell something like a unified rebellion of the willing executioners against the actual interest groups, if it weren't for the fact that the executioner groups, the willing executioner groups, are themselves completely delusional and actually thereby interest groups. For instance, I know for a fact that the Abwehrhand is significantly fucked down the lurchy direction and flavor, so to speak. And I know that in Germany, the willing executioners are significantly fucked down pseudoscientific shit. And I know that elsewhere it's with that rebirth soul migration shit and whatnot. And I'm not talking about random ass drones that they shove along, you know, hate drones or whatnot. That's not what I'm talking. I'm not talking the hoodwinked actual IG individuals who come along to torture every blue moon so that they feel good. Ha, they did me in. I cannot defend myself. They are so super at that. When they are completely fucked by their very own and all the other willing executioner groups. That is why it's not really a rebellion. Because it's not that the willing executioners were at all sane. They are not. Not in the least. They are just as crazy as the interest groups, just that they collaborate with one another. Which is remarkable, really, because the only way I think that is possible if they figure that, how to put that? Well, quintessentially, even that will fall apart, right? But my problem being that currently it hasn't fallen apart yet. Which means that all the willing executioners use me as a target for their shit, knowing perfectly well that everything they shove into these fields is completely identified and readable to all the other interest groups who have access to my fields, and can be analyzed. Well, you know, so the journalists say, well, look here, the other days, ex-Austrians made this with our teeth. Ha! Well, what do you know? You know, they are fucking you up, interest groups. That's what they're doing. They are fucking you up. And I understood that today, right? In the sense that I actually understood today that I always thought that some of them were hoodwinking one another. Not the interest groups, the willing executioners, or the Abwehr specifically, as a willing executioner group, was hoodwinking other IGs who then sicked their willing executioners at me without those willing executioners maybe having the technical access to the extraction fields or whatnot. But I come to understand now it is much more likely, and from this day on I actually consider that to be the case, that they all know what they all are doing against me, because they all read along. They all do. That said, just the other day or two, there was this word swapping shit, which, again, does not contradict what I just said, because really, if there were a fixed list, then it would be accessible and retranslatable to everybody else who tortures me, so they would not be thrown. Of course, if there were any actual IG people reading along, they would be thrown, because they might not be given the retranslation table that their own willing executioners do have. You people think about that. And specifically die Abwehr und Co. checken, ja, wieder ein Haufen Routinen, die Proof gemacht haben, wie ihr Proof machen werdet.